The campfire crackled, its embers glowing like tiny stars against the inky night. But I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. Ethan's laugh, bright and unguarded, cut through the chilly air of the Oregon forest, pulling me in like gravity. I was drowning in the sound, in the way his breath fogged in the cold. And I knew right then I was in trouble. We were college sophomores, thrown together on a biology department study trip to catalog native plants in the Cascades. I'd known Ethan for months, quiet, whip-smart, with a smile that could stop time, but we'd never been close. Not until the professor paired us to share a tent. "It's just for 3 nights," she'd said, oblivious to the way my heart lurched at the thought of being that close to him. I was Jamie, the guy who kept his head down, aced his exams, and never let anyone see the chaos inside. Ethan, Thuff, was different. He wore his heart on his sleeve, always sketching in that worn leather journal, his thoughts spilling onto pages I'd never dared to read. That first night, we set up our tent in silence, the kind that hums with unspoken words. The forest was alive around Usoul's hooting, leaves rustling, but inside the tent, it was just us. Ethan unzipped his sleeping bag, his movements deliberate, and I caught the faintest tremble in his hands. "You nervous about something?" I asked, half joking, trying to break the tension. He looked up, his brown eyes catching the dim light of our lantern. "Maybe," he said, his voice soft but steady. "This trip feels big, like something's gonna change." I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded, lying back on my sleeping bag, staring at the tent's ceiling as if it held answers. The next morning, we were up at dawn, trudging through dew-soaked ferns to collect plant samples. Ethan was all focus, jotting notes in his journal, his fingers brushing against delicate leaves like they were precious. I watched him more than the plants, memorizing the way his brow furrowed when he was deep in thought. "You're staring," he said suddenly, not looking up. My face burned. "I'm not," I lied, fumbling with my clipboard. He smirked, and something in that look made my chest tighten. We worked side by side all day, our shoulders brushing as we knelt to examine moss or measure tree bark. Each touch felt like a spark, and I wondered if he felt it too. That night, the group gathered around the campfire, trading stories and marshmallows. Ethan sat across from me, the flames casting shadows across his face. Someone asked about first loves, and the group erupted in laughter and teasing. Ethan stayed quiet, his gaze fixed on the fire. "What about you, Jamie?" a classmate prodded. I shrugged, muttering something vague about high school, but my eyes kept darting to Ethan. He was writing in his journal again, his expression unreadable. When we crawled into the tent later, the air felt heavier. "You didn't say much back there," I ventured, zipping up my sleeping bag. Ethan paused, his pen hovering over his journal. "Some stories aren't easy to tell," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to push, to ask why, but the vulnerability in his eyes stopped me. Instead, I lay down, listening to the soft scratch of his pen until I drifted off. The second morning was when everything shifted. I woke to the sound of Ethan's quiet breathing, closer than I expected. Our sleeping bags had somehow ended up pressed together in the night, his arm slung carelessly across my chest. My heart pounded so loud I was sure it'd wake him. I didn't move, didn't dare breathe too deeply, afraid to break the moment. His face was inches from mine, peaceful in sleep, his lashes casting faint shadows on his cheeks. I'd never seen him like this, unguarded. Soft. I wanted to stay there forever. He stirred, blinking awake, and for a split second, our eyes locked. Morning, he mumbled, his voice rough with sleep. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a storm. You're warm, he said, a shy smile tugging at his lips. I laughed, nervous, and the sound broke the spell. He rolled onto his back, stretching, but the ghost of that moment lingered. We spent the day hiking to a new site, a meadow bursting with wildflowers. Ethan was quieter than usual, his journal tucked away. I caught him watching me, his expression unreadable, and my stomach twisted with a mix of hope and fear. What was this? Was I imagining the way his gaze lingered? The way his fingers brushed mine when he passed me a water bottle? That night, a storm rolled in, thunder rumbling in the distance. The tent felt smaller, the air thick with the scent of rain and pine. We lay side by side, listening to the patter of raindrops on the canvas. Jamie, Ethan said suddenly, his voice cutting through the dark. You ever feel like you're hiding something from everyone? My breath caught. Yeah, I admitted, my voice barely audible. All the time. I didn't say what, and he didn't ask, but the silence that followed felt like a confession. I wanted to tell him everything: how I'd known I was gay since I was 13, how I'd buried it under good grades and fake smiles, how being near him made it impossible to keep pretending. But fear clamped down, and I stayed quiet. He turned toward me, his face half lit by the faint glow of the lantern. I'm glad we're sharing this tent, he said, his voice soft but certain. My heart stuttered. Me too, I whispered, and for the first time, I let myself believe he might feel the same. The storm raged outside, but inside the tent, it was just us, the world shrinking to the space between our sleeping bags. Ethan's words from the night before echoed in my head. I'm glad we're sharing this tent. I clung to them like a lifeline, replaying the way his voice had softened, the way his eyes had held mine. But doubt crept in, cold and sharp. What if I was reading too much into it? What if I was just seeing what I wanted to see? Morning broke with a drizzle, the forest damp and glistening. We packed up camp, our movements synchronized from days of working together. Ethan was quieter today. His usual spark dimmed. I wanted to ask what was wrong, but every time I opened my mouth, fear stopped me. Instead, we focused on our tasks, cataloging plants with mechanical precision. The meadow was vibrant, alive with color, but it felt muted without his usual chatter. At lunch, we sat apart from the group, sharing a granola bar on a moss-covered rock. You okay? I finally asked, unable to stand the silence. He looked at me, his brown eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought he'd say something big. Instead, he shrugged. Just thinking, he said, tearing off a piece of the bar and handing it to me. His fingers brushed mine, and I felt that spark again, electric and undeniable. The day passed in a blur of samples and notes, but the tension between us grew. Every glance, every accidental touch, felt like a question neither of us dared to answer. By evening, the group was exhausted, and the professor called an early night. Back in the tent, Ethan pulled out his journal, but instead of writing, he stared at it, his pen still. "What's in there?" I asked, nodding at the journal. My voice was light, but my pulse was racing. He hesitated, his fingers tightening around the leather cover. "Just stuff," he said, but his tone was guarded, like he was protecting something fragile. I didn't push, but the curiosity burned. What was he hiding? And why did it feel like it had everything to do with me? That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, leaving only the hum of the forest. Ethan was awake too, I could tell by the rhythm of his breathing. "Jamie," he whispered, so soft I almost missed it. "You ever think about what you'd do if you weren't afraid?" The question hit like a punch. I turned to face him, our sleeping bags so close I could feel the warmth of his body. "Every day?" I said, my voice raw. "But it's hard. People, they judge." I didn't need to say more. He knew. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes flickered with something like pain. "I'm tired of hiding," he said, his voice breaking. "I've been hiding for years, and it's killing me." My heart stopped. Was he saying what I thought he was? Before I could respond, he sat up, running a hand through his hair. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. "But I'm scared it'll ruin everything." I sat up too, my chest tight. "You can tell me anything," I said, and I meant it. The air felt fragile, like one wrong word could shatter it. He looked at me, his eyes wide and vulnerable, and then he reached for his journal. He flipped it open, his hands shaking, and handed it to me. The page was filled with sketches, trees, flowers, the curve of a river, but in the margins were words, fragments of thoughts. I see him, and it hurts. I want to be brave, but I'm not. What if he doesn't feel the same? My breath caught as I read, realizing the him was me. I looked up, and Ethan was watching me, his face pale, his eyes pleading. "Ethan," I started, but my voice cracked. I wanted to say I felt the same, that I'd been falling for him since the moment we met, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I reached out, my hand brushing his. He didn't pull away. For a moment, we just sat there, hands touching, the journal open between us, the weight of our unspoken truths filling the tent. The next day was the last of the trip. The group was abuzz with plans for the drive back to campus, but I could barely focus. Ethan's confession hung between us, unspoken but heavy. We worked in silence, our movements careful, like we were afraid to break something. At one point, he dropped his pen, and when we both reached for it, our hands collided. He laughed, a nervous, beautiful sound, and I felt the world tilt. That afternoon, we wandered off from the group, drawn to a quiet clearing where the trees opened to a view of the mountains. The air was crisp, the sky a deep blue. Ethan sat on a fallen log, his journal in his lap. "I meant what I said last night," he said, his voice steady now. "I like you, Jamie, more than I should." My heart soared, but fear clawed at it. "I like you too," I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "But I'm scared. I've never done this before." He nodded, like he understood, and reached for my hand. His touch was warm, grounding, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. We sat there, hands clasped, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. The world felt bigger, scarier, but also brighter. I didn't know what came next, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. The drive back to campus was a blur, the hum of the van drowned out by the pounding of my heart. Ethan sat beside me, our knees brushing in the cramped back seat, each touch a reminder of the clearing, of his hand in mine, of the truth we'd finally spoken. But as the forest faded and the city loomed, reality crept in, cold and heavy. Back at school, the world felt different. The hallways were too loud, the stairs too sharp. I'd always been good at blending in, but now I felt exposed, like everyone could see the secret I carried. Ethan, Thuff, was fearless. He'd catch my eye across the lecture hall, his smile small but steady, and it was enough to keep me grounded. We stole moments where we could a coffee shop study session, a walk through the quad at dusk. Each one felt like a rebellion, a quiet defiance against the fear that still gnawed at me. One night, in his dorm room, he showed me more of his journal. Pages filled with sketches of Mimi profile as I studied, my hands holding a plant sample, my eyes lit by the campfire. I couldn't stop drawing you, he admitted, his cheeks flushed. I kissed him then, my first kiss, clumsy and perfect, and the world fell away. But not everyone was kind. A classmate caught us holding hands behind the library, and by the next day, whispers followed us. Fags, someone muttered in the cafeteria, loud enough to sting. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't let go of my hand. They don't matter, he said, his voice fierce. I wanted to believe him, but the shame I'd buried for years clawed its way back. Things came to a head at a department mixer a week later. We'd agreed to keep things low-key, but Ethan had other ideas. He stood up during a lull in the conversation, his voice steady as he thanked the professor for the trip. Then he turned to me, his eyes bright. And to Jamie, he said, for making it unforgettable. The room went quiet, and I felt every eye on us. My face burned, but Ethan just smiled, like he'd claimed something no one could take away. Outside, under the stars, I grabbed his arm. Why'd you do that? I demanded, my voice shaking. Now everyone knows. He looked at me, his expression soft but unyielding. I'm done hiding. Jamie, I want to be with you out in the open. Don't you? I wanted to say yes, but fear choked me. I'd grown up in a small town, where being gay was a sin whispered about in church. I'd seen what happened to kids who didn't fit in. But Ethan was different. He was brave in a way I didn't know how to be. I'm trying, I said finally, my voice breaking. He pulled me into a hug, his arm steady, and I let myself believe we could do this. The next few weeks were a tightrope. Some friends pulled away, their silence louder than words. Others surprised us, offering quiet support and nod in the hall. A shared coffee. Ethan's courage was contagious. And slowly, I found my own. I started talking about him openly, saying my boyfriend with a mix of pride and disbelief. Each time, it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. One evening, we went back to the forest, just the two of us. It was spring now, the trees budding with new life. We sat in the same clearing, the one where we'd first admitted how we felt. Ethan opened his journal, showing me a new sketch drawing of us, hands linked, standing together against the world. This is us, he said, his voice warm. No more hiding. I looked at him, at the boy who'd changed everything, and felt a weight lift. The fear wasn't gone, but it was smaller now, overshadowed by something stronger. Love. Hope. The promise of a future we'd build together, one brave step at a time. We didn't know what lay ahead: judgments, fights, moments of doubt. But as we sat there, the forest whispering around us, I knew we'd face it together. That morning in the tent, when we'd woken tangled in each other's warmth, had been the start. It had changed everything, not just between us, but within me. I was no longer the boy who hid. I was Jamie, in love, and for the first time, I was free.